Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. Looking at the water vapor imagery this morning, we just have a steady stream of conveyor belt of moisture riding that subtropical jet. That's going to provide some lift today over Texas, bringing heavier rains for them and some severe storms. But then we have a secondary piece of energy that will be trailing behind this one, even stronger system that looks to make landfall on that Sunday time frame. So I appreciate all my subscribers out there. I would love to reach 250,000 subscribers by March. So if you are new here, hit the subscribe button. I put out a lot of content pretty much on a daily basis so I can keep you well ahead of the storm. So here's the setup for today. So we've got some sporadic, kind of sporadic showers this morning across the Bay Area. That's also have some sporadic showers across portions of Arizona, but then there's that piece of energy that will be making impact across portions of Texas later on this afternoon into the overnight time frame. The Storm Prediction Center does in fact have a marginal and even slight risk for severe weather across those areas into West Texas, down into the Abilene region, into the San Antonio region, which does include all the way down south into Del Rio. So looking at the surface map later on this afternoon, there's the more heavier rains that's going to impact those areas across Oregon into California. We are going to be mixing in some of those heavier snows across the Sierras, as well as into portions of Nevada, into Utah. That's going to be trailing into Arizona, and that's also going to be picking up some heavier snows into Colorado as well. And that could be significant because the system does look to kind of slow down. But there's the lift mechanism over Texas today. I think a lot of this gets going across those areas late in the afternoon time frame, but especially into the overnight time frame as well. And as we go through the overnight into that Saturday morning, there's the heavier rains that looks to impact north and central, and especially those areas into East Texas. But then also there's the more significant low pressure, even deepening low pressure, that will be bringing some heavier snows across those areas into Idaho, into Montana, through Wyoming, but especially there into Colorado. Those areas in the mountain regions could actually get some feet of snow with this system. Definitely a lot of higher water content values with this. So that's, perfect setup for very heavy snows for those ski resorts out there. But there's the warmer conditions. I mean, we've been seeing this kind of those ridging taking over for a good part of the country with very warm anomalies. So yeah, definitely enjoy it while it lasts, because we do see some changes, maybe in the extended time frame, but definitely enjoy the warmer conditions. And this is what's actually fueling some of this heavier rains going forward. So we're going to kind of delve into the forecast, but first, a word from my sponsor.
Hey there, learners of all ages. If you're after a fun way to amp up your education, check out Brilliant, today's video sponsor. It's not just your typical study stuff. Think of it more like a weather forecast for learning. Whether you're a student itching for excitement or a parent wanting to spice up the learning game, Brilliant is the way to go. Let's make learning a blast together. Brilliant is intuitive, hands-on, challenging, and it teaches new skills from basic to advanced, like a well-crafted roadmap. It's interactive, fun, bite-sized, and the perfect blend for students and professionals alike. The low-pressure environment encourages you to think and learn visually. And guess what? New content is added monthly, like a refreshing breeze of knowledge in your forecast. Get started with a free 30-day trial. And guess what? The first 200 of you to visit brilliant.org/pal get an exclusive 20% off an annual plan, a discount as valuable as uncovering hidden gems in the world of education. Embrace the forecast of brilliance. Give yourself the gift of Brilliant, where learning is an adventure with a guide you can trust. Visit brilliant.org/pal and let the educational journey begin.
So let's take a look at this overall setup. So we've got this ridge of high pressure over the top. That's what's bringing all those well above average temperatures. But then riding this subtropical jet, which is pretty prevalent in those El Nino winters, and that's exactly what we're seeing. the main impacts is across the south, where the polar jet pretty much is tapped out and the subtropical jet is taking over. And that's where all the heavier rains, and especially once we get into that Sunday timeframe, this is the piece of energy that I'm definitely concerned about for the West Coast, because it's a compounding effect. We've already seen all those heavier rains, across that region, but this looks to be an even more significant event and bringing very exceptional heavier rains for those areas into Southern California. So if we look at the surface map, by the time we head into that Sunday timeframe, look at the deep dark greens highlighted across Central and Southern California there. That could lead to some extensive flooding, and the heavier snows will be moving inland as well across Nevada. There's the other piece of energy. That first piece of energy, now it's moved out of Texas, but it will be impacting those areas across the southeast, especially those areas in Mississippi and Alabama, and getting into that Florida region. Over the top, that's that ridging of high pressure, a lot of sinking air, and not much activity is going on across a good part of the Dakotas, across the Ohio Valley, and as well as into the Northeast. But there's the concerning aspect of this storm. The weather, the Weather Prediction Center has actually upgraded this to a moderate risk for excessive rainfall. So we're looking for heavy rains with that secondary piece of energy coming through the Bay Area again, but those areas across portions of Santa Barbara and to Oxnard, all the way down to Los Angeles, you could be picking up some pretty exceptional excessive rainfall during the day on Sunday. And then with the low pressure center kind of stalling out across those regions, yes, we've got back-to-back days of moderate risk for excessive rainfall, even this far out. This is day 4, so I'm hoping this does not go high, because some of the short-range, high-resolution guidances are printing out some 6 to 12-inch totals across these areas, close around the Santa Barbara region, into the Oxnard. I was reading the discussion by the National Weather Service out of Los Angeles there. Some of these mountain regions could actually get up to 15 inches of rainfall with this system coming in ashore that Sunday, Monday timeframe. So we're looking at a strong, more significant atmospheric river event that will be making impact across those areas, across the West Coast, inundating with heavier rains extending from Sacramento through San Francisco, but especially down to the Santa Barbara region, into Los Angeles, and all the way down into San Diego. There's the extensive heavier snows across the Sierra. Yeah, we're talking feet of snow. A lot of this gets going around 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and it lasts for a couple days, really all the way through that Tuesday afternoon. So definitely high concern for excessive flash flooding across those areas across Southern California. And yes, some of these areas could easily pick up 6 to 12 inches of heavy rainfall. This is on top of what you've actually seen already with that first event. So here's the surface map by that Monday timeframe. So yes, the entire state of California across Oregon gets inundated with that heavier rains. There's that first piece of energy that's going to be stalling out towards portions of Florida into the far extreme portions of the southeast. Notice the dry slot again, still over the top. That's that ridging of high pressure. That's the sinking air. So most of the instability, most of the weather is out west. And looking at the overall temperature anomalies, by the time we head into that Wednesday timeframe, we start to see that slow transition. Remember, Alaska's been brutally cold as of late. Now they start to turn warmer, and that's the change, the slow progression of the change we've been kind of highlighting, with some of those cooler anomalies coming back for those West Coast regions. And this will slowly be migrating from west to east, but definitely take advantage and enjoy the warmer conditions while we have. And some of these areas are seeing some 60s and 70s, especially for those areas further to the south. You're almost experiencing some like April-like weather in January and February timeframe. So, but here's the surface map going into that Wednesday, heading into that Thursday timeframe. Yes, as some of that colder air will slowly start to shift a little bit further off into our central US, yeah, it's going to bring the snow a little bit further off to the east. So now we're talking some of those areas into Nebraska, getting into the Dakotas with some of that heavier snows for them. But with that second piece of energy, it's just going to be very windy. So it's just going to be a conveyor belt with that more active subtropical jet. This whole area across the West Coast is going to be impacting with some heavier winds, and that's going to extend into even next week. I mean, a week from now, they're still going to be on the windy side all the way into those areas across the Southwest, into the portions of the Rockies, getting into West Texas there. And looking at the updated drought outlook, we have seen some improvements. So obviously those areas that got impacted across the West Coast, you're really not impacted by a drought right now. And we do see improvements over Arizona, getting into portions of New Mexico. But notice the dry slot, and this has been pretty prevalent out here in eastern New Mexico and far extreme portions of West Texas. That looks to continue as the drought looks to persist for those areas. But where they are getting all the heavier rain, remember those areas across Mississippi and into Louisiana, where some of those areas were like 40 inches below average. So yes, they've had a lot of rain, and they still will get any more. It takes a while to put a dent and wipe away an exceptional drought. It doesn't happen overnight, so it could take months to do that. But we are seeing the compounding effect and the drought improving for some of those areas. And yes, we're going to be seeing the drought more or less kind of persist in some of those areas across Montana, where they are into that less active, polar jet, which is again pretty prevalent for that El Nino year. But here's your overall rainfall for the next 7 days. And yeah, what sticks out like a sore thumb is we're underneath that ridge. That's where all the sinking air. So you got almost next to little activity happening across those regions. It's all further south, but especially into those areas across the West Coast. And look at the bullseye there down into Southern California. Those areas could pick up to a foot of snow and some of those a foot of rain in some of those areas across Southern California, but especially in the Sierras. All that's going to be snow, but the heavier rains will be extending into Nevada, going into Utah there, into Arizona, and then they pick back up again. Notice the dry slot right there in the eastern portions of New Mexico and West Texas. I wish I could change it for you, but once it taps into that Gulf of Mexico moisture, yes, the heavier rains pick back up again in Kansas, through Oklahoma, through central and eastern portions of Texas there, through Louisiana, and back into Mississippi and Alabama, and getting into that Florida region over that next 7-day time span. If you look at the snow, yeah, that's where the heavier snows are going to be. So easily, 4 or 5. I was even reading that discussion from Los Angeles. They actually talked about some 7-foot totals up there in some of those peaks of those mountain regions across the Sierras. Just crazy amounts of snow. That tells you how much water vapor is available and how much water is going to be impacting across California with combined of, rain and all the heavier snows in the mountain regions. And that's going to push into those Intermountain West. And yes, those areas across the mountain regions of Colorado is going to be picking up some significant snows as well. So guys, I appreciate you guys following. Do hit the subscribe button and follow along throughout 2024 so I can keep you well ahead of the storm.